The Earth would require 1.5 years to recover from the resources we consume and the waste we produce in 1 year. If current trends continue, then by 2050, we would need the equivalent of 3 Earths to support us. And of course, we only have one. What do I mean with support us? First, we need food to support the 7 billion people that inhabit the Earth. And second, we need energy to maintain the lifestyle we have. Okay, so remember, this talk is about food and about energy. So let's start with food. In order to grow plants, we need fertilizer. And there are 2 essential compounds we need to grow plants, which is phosphor, P, and nitrogen, N. Without these compounds, plant could simply not grow. So the development of phosphor and nitrogen over 250 years increased tremendously. So there's a high demand. There was a high demand during the last years. And only because we were able to produce these fertilizers, the population could grow. 80% of the people in the world live in developing countries. And despite of all this fertilizer being produced, approximately 16% of these people living in this region are chronically undernourished. So let's come to phosphor. So phosphor is very essential. It is a limiting resource. And what that means is it's actually very simple. If we use it up, there's no more left. Phosphor is not equally distributed in the world. For instance, the continent Africa has approximately 50% of all phosphor on Earth. Ironically, the poor African countries have to pay 2 to 6 times more phosphor than we have. For instance, due to less purchasing power, to just name one reason. If you're lucky, then you were born into the Western world, and then all this affects you less, at least for now. The price of phosphor was very stable for a long time, and suddenly peaked up from 50 to almost $500 per ton. The future price of phosphor is not known, but if it keeps increasing, I can tell you it will affect all of us here. The trend of phosphor price reminds me of the trend of the oil during the oil crisis, which was also peaking. This was handled very, very differently, for instance, with car-free days. And actually, this really surprises me that the price of phosphor and oil are handled so differently. In fact, I don't really understand it. And I can tell you why. Strictly taken, does the oil price drive the price of the food? Because we need energy/oil to transport our food and to harvest it. But we cannot grow our plants on oil. And we cannot eat oil, right? So there are all different kinds of innovations currently going on to replace the oil. For instance, solar power, wind power. But if we look at phosphor, there's no such a replacement. So let's get to nitrogen. I want you to all take now a deep breath. Every breath you take contains 75% denitrogen gas. And there is a process which can fix the nitrogen from the air into a plant-friendly form. But this is a very, very energy expensive process, and it consumes approximately 1% of all energy used on Earth. A country not having access to energy and also not having purchasing power, it's going to be difficult for such a country to access nitrogen, to access this fertilizer. So this brings me to energy, and there are different types of energy on Earth. And I would like to focus now on coal. Similar to phosphor, coal is not equally distributed. There are some countries who have coal, others don't. And also the coal demand increased with increasing population. So very obviously, there's an uneven distribution of nutrients and energy in the world. And the question is it possible to bring these resources into areas where they are not present? And is it possible to probably even recover them? And the answer is, it's us. And I can tell you, there's something what we all in this room have in common. And when you flush the toilet, that's the moment where my core business starts. So, what is this? If you eat, then you take up nutrients and energy. But we are not doing that very efficiently. For instance, only 1% of all phosphor in our food is going to be taken up by our bodies. So the rest, the 99%, ends up in our waste. So wouldn't it be logic to probably recover the nutrients and the energy from our waste? And actually, what do I mean with recovery? So we have our plants, we harvest the fruits, and we're going to eat them. Remember, we have all something in common, and actually there are 7 billion of us. So we are talking about tremendous amounts of waste. And after we use the toilet, our waste enters the wastewater treatment plant, actually my core business. And the main purpose of wastewater treatment is and always will be to create clean water. But by doing so, there's also waste being created. And what if we could use this waste, which is also called sludge, and loop it back into the process and use the energy and nutrients from it? In the past, I worked in an engineering company called GMB, and they work on the biodrying technology where they treat the sludge created in wastewater treatment plants. The plant I'm going to present you treats approximately 15% of all sludge being generated in the Netherlands. So, and you might know compost. I know some of you have probably even a compost in the backyard to compost the kitchen waste. And you might have noticed that from this compost, there's some heat created, some like water vapor being created. And this is also what happens in this process and what you also see on the slide. And the energy created by microorganisms can be used, by which 9.3 megawatt can be recovered from the air, which is equivalent to what 9,000 households would need to supply their homes. And from the process air, the nitrogen has been brought into a form which is actually easy to recover, by which nitrogen fertilizer is produced. The product was quite hot, so the pathogens are removed, and this end product, so not the air, but the sludge itself, the dried sludge, can be already used as fertilizer. But this is not all. The dried sludge has an energy value which is very similar to brown coal. And if we use brown coal, then we take carbon, which has been fixed for millions of years ago, and then we burn it to gain energy and exhaust CO2, which is increasing global warming. If we burn the sludge, of course, we also exhaust CO2, logically. But this CO2 has been in the cycle before. That's why we can call it CO2 neutral. The burned sludge, the ash from it, contains still phosphor and can potentially be recovered from it. I hope that you learned from this presentation that waste is not necessarily waste, but a useful, sustainable resource. Thank you.